Welcome to the 29th of June 2020 Central Coast Council Extraordinary Meeting. To our viewers tonight, we are still bound by the public health order that currently restricts large gatherings in confined spaces and requirements in physical distancing. Council have a responsibility to ensure our community, staff and councillors are all safe, and that includes creating a safe environment. It is for those reasons present that we will continue to hold our ordinary meetings remotely, including, sorry, it hasn't commenced. Council, sorry, it still hasn't commenced, so we're waiting.
Apologies, Madam Mayor, there does seem to be a delay.
A further delay. That's okay. Just keep telling me when it's ready to go, please.
I note we are recording.
Okay, I can start. Welcome to the 29th of June 2020 Central Coast Council Extraordinary Meeting. To our viewers tonight, we are still bound by the public health order that currently restricts large gatherings in confined spaces and requirements in physical distancing. Council have a responsibility to ensure our community, staff, councillors are safe, and that includes creating a safe environment. It is for those reasons that at present, we continue to hold our meetings remotely, including public forums. The situation is evolving and one that we will continue to monitor in consultation with staff and councillors. Our priority is the safety of all of our community. It is with that in mind that we will monitor the circumstances week to week and consider all the factors. Restrictions are changing at a very rapid rate. For those reasons, please ensure you remain up to date with current information through federal and state government websites. For council-run activities and events, please check our website. Thank you. I will now hand over to the CEO, Mr. Murphy, to run through some of the specifics of tonight's meeting. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight's extraordinary council meeting will be conducted remotely. This is in accordance with the amendment to the Local Government Act 1993, Section 747A, COVID-19 Pandemic Special Provisions, Clause 1A1. This amendment commenced on the 25th of March 2020 and has been put in place for a period of 6 months, but can be extended to a period of 12 months to ensure the safety of the councillors, staff and the public. Councillors, you're still required to adhere to the relevant policies and procedures, including the Code of Meeting Practice and the Code of Conduct. I note that councillors have been provided guidelines on how the ordinary meeting will be conducted tonight, but for those attending via webcast, I'd like to advise the following. Councillors will be required to move or second an item by way of showing of hand, indicate they wish to speak on any item by showing of hand. Once identified, the councillor will have 3 minutes to speak when the Mayor calls on them. Ask questions by showing of hand, and if required, the relevant executive leadership team member will become visible for the question to be asked or responded to. For any other items, showing of hand is required. Remain visible during the meeting. If they are no longer visible, they will be determined to have left the room. Voting will be conducted by a show of hands, and the Mayor will call off the names for and against. Councillors will be asked to keep their hand visibly raised for the vote. Those councillors or staff who have pecuniary interest on items will be removed from the webcast during discussion and returned once completed. If there are any technical issues during the meeting, the Mayor will be advised accordingly and provide those in attendance an update. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I'd just like to again remind councillors and staff that the meeting is being recorded and webcast, so please be mindful of what you say. Please make sure that you turn off your electronic devices to silent or ensure that you are free from any interruptions, as it will make it hard to hear what is going on. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Darkin Young people, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Councillors, I note that Councillor Pillen was granted a leave of absence for the meeting tonight. I also note that we have an apology from Councillor Vincent and Councillor Marquette. Councillors, there are, as everybody else is in attendance, do we have any requests for any future leave of absences? And there are no hands. Thank you, councillors. Do I have a mover of the leave? Councillor Gale. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Smith. All those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. The first item of business tonight is the disclosure of interest. Are there any disclosure of interest, councillors? If you have a disclosure, please raise your hand and I will go from there. So Councillor Gale has an interest. Councillor Hogan. Any other hands? Myself? No? Okay, Councillor Gale, your disclosure, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mine's 3.1. It's a non-pecuniary, insignificant disclosure with regards to being a previous board member at Coast Community Connections. So I'm no longer in that position, but I still want to make a declaration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hogan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I make a declaration on item 3.1, fees and charges. As my employer occupies council community facilities and it's a pecuniary interest. So I will be leaving the chamber and will not participate in discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hogan. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Like I've done in the past, I just declare an insignificant non-pecuniary as someone who plays amateur club sport on the Central Coast and uses the facilities, which would be affected by the fees and charges.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Oh, Councillor McLaughlin.
I'll just declare a less than significant non-pecuniary interest on item 3.1 regarding fees and charges. My business does order certificates from council, but apparently it's a statutory state government guideline and cannot be set. The fees and charges cannot be set by council, so I have no bearing on the. It has no bearing on this my capacity to change. So I'll declare a less than significant and stay in the chamber and accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Greenaway.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to declare a less than significant non-pecuniary in relation to item 3.1, just on the basis that I have family members who are also, they utilise the sporting facilities on the coast, in the north and in the south, that I will stay in the chamber and debate and vote on the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And I am declaring a pecuniary interest on item 3.1, the update on the operational plan 2021 in the fees and charges as a relative operates a business and one of these fees to be determined impacts that business. So I will be leaving for that item. And as I've flagged with councillors, I'm proposing a procedural motion to separate consideration of the operational plan and grants from fees and charges. So councillors, do we have, Councillor Holstein?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I find it extremely interesting on the declaration. I do as well work in a casual capacity at 2 venues that lease premises off council. And in 30 years, and in all of the time I've done that, there's never been a need. It was like the rates, there hasn't been a need. Now, I declare that I have an interest in that I am employed by those entities. I really am struggling that I need to declare. It'd be like declaring on the rates or declaring on a sport that I might play or a pool that I might enter or a library book. I have never ever seen, to the extent that we are now as councillors, we declare on everything, but the fees and charges have never been something that I've had to declare on. So I'm perplexed at this stage on whether I need to actually show that for the sake of the time I work at two entities, the casual capacity that actually are council facilities or leased from council. I just want it noted, I don't believe it impacts upon my ability to make a decision in regards to fees or charges. These are leasing agreements with council, not fees and charges initially, more so the lease arrangements, which I wouldn't enter into any discussions on, more so than the fee or charges, no different than entering a pool or a library or something like that. So I do want it recorded that I have an issue. I'm a staff member. I don't have any involvement with negotiation of rentals or that with them.
Thank you, Councillor Holstein. I've got a question from Councillor Greenaway, and then I have a further question from Councillor Hogan. So I'll take Councillor Greenaway. You have a question?
I just wondered if there's any capacity to just like the in seriatim when we vote on notices of motion, is there any possibility that the fees or charges that are the problem for some of the councillors be debated separately? Because there are so many fees and charges, and it's just unfortunate if people are going to be not able to vote on the balance of them when maybe only one or two impact them. Is that a possibility?
Councillor Greenway. I'll just take some advice on that. I'll go to Councillor Hogan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in relation to what Councillor Holstein was saying, I think perhaps the difference is that I'm the manager or CEO of the organisation, so fees and charges are very close to something that I work with. It's always been advice of the staff to declare a conflict of interest and a pecuniary one at that. When the fees and charges advisory group came up, I would have loved to have been on that. However, I couldn't. And I've always been very clear along the whole process that's been going on for over a year that I do have a conflict of interest and have declared that at meetings and in briefings. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. We are going to move a procedural that will remove it. We'll actually allow people to vote and or not vote. So there's only two people declaring significant anyway, and the rest are all non-pecuniary, less than significant, which will be able to vote. Councillor Smith. Sorry, you need to unmute.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you hear me? Yes. So just in line with Councillor Holstein's comments, I will just declare a non-pecuniary less than significant as I work for the Department of Education and they lease a facility from council. So not involved in any of those discussions or negotiations, but I'll declare there as less than significant and non-pecuniary. Thank you.
Thank you.
I noticed you've unmuted me again. When I asked the question about whether some of those items could be excised, I hadn't heard back from the staff as to whether that's an option or not. Or
well, we've actually Miss Sullivan's happy to answer.
Through you, Madam Chair, in relation to Councillor Greenaway's question, I spoke to the Office of Local Government in relation to this morning. Of course, it's absolutely a matter for Council how they might consider this. Their advice was that you would certainly take steps such as what you're recommending if Council were in danger of losing a quorum. And I note that the Mayor has suggested a procedural motion for the fees and charges, but beyond that, it would be a matter for council to determine. Of course, you could do them in seriatim. It would be a matter for council.
Thank you. So Councillor Burke.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I just like to declare I'm not declaring on anything because everyone else has.
Great, thank you. threw me off my game. Thanks. Councillors, do I have a mover for the motion of the interest? Councillor Gale, seconded by Councillor McGregor. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Greenaway, are you voting no? Okay, so all those for is Councillor Burke, Councillor Matthews, Councillor Gale, Councillor McGregor, Councillor Mertens, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Hogan, Councillor Sundstrom, Councillor Best, Councillor Smith, Councillor Holstein. All those against? Abstentions? Councillor Greenaway, thank you. Moving on. So we have the first item, sorry. Yeah, okay, is the LSPS. So I note that we have an amendment. Councillor Smith, are you moving this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have an alternate recommendation that I sent through to the staff this afternoon. So if I could get that up on the screen, I will move that. And that looks to be the correct one. So it was circulated to councillors this afternoon, or late this afternoon.
Do we have a seconder for Councillor Sundstrom? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will just speak to that, and I want to start by thanking staff for their work on the local strategic planning statement. It is a really huge process and a significant document, and I know that there has been a lot of work required to get it to this point. It's also an important document, and I do want to highlight that because I think it's not clear that this is a significant thing that councillors need to be engaged with. So the council's LSPS will set out the 20-year vision for land use in the local area. It will set out the shared community values to be maintained and enhanced, how future growth and change will be managed, the special characteristics which contribute to the local area. The LSPS will inform changes to the planning controls in Council's local environment plan and development control plan to achieve those priorities. It will also inform other planning tools such as contributions plans to ensure that local facilities are provided as the community's needs change. So it is an important document. We did resolve that we would approach it on a ward basis so that ward councillors will have the opportunity to be very involved in that process, and that we would provide chapters for each ward. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, it came about with restrictions right at the time that we were seeking to go out on exhibition. And as we know, we requested an extension of time from the state government, and they declined to allow us that time to go out and engage more fully with our community. So the motion that is up on the screen effectively does the following. So it does endorse an interim local strategic planning statement to go forward from the meeting tonight. And that is a requirement of the legislation that we need to submit an LSPS by the 1st of July. On the 27th of April, staff did suggest that we could endorse an interim and then review the LSPS to then make changes as required. So that is essentially what this motion does. It notes that we've got a resolution on the 9th of June that got through council and required a number of changes. It also takes into account recommended changes from staff as a part of this report, and some other changes that I circulated to councillors this afternoon. But importantly, it then requires that we have a 3-month period to review the interim LSPS and ward chapters. It provides a further opportunity for interested councillors to workshop the LSPS with staff, and then requires that we submit a final document by November. So that is what this motion seeks to achieve. I do, and I know I need to close there, Madam Mayor, but again, I want to thank the staff, and I also want to thank the community that have made submissions. I think we did need to do sort of more grassroots consultation, and unfortunately because of COVID we couldn't do that. So it is incumbent upon our councillors to take that bit of extra time and make sure that what we put up reflects the community's aspirations. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Sundstrom.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd also like to start by thanking the staff, especially for the forums that were rolled out on a ward basis. I'd like to also say thank you to the community from the Gosford East Ward who attended in strong numbers and gave some great feedback. They were really fully engaged with this process, and it is an important process. This latest iteration of the resolution to act on the LSPS reflects the need for this council to listen to the community and to respond to the direction from the state government. The LSPS is a high-level document, but we still need to get it right. It still needs to be a guiding document for other important matters of council business, including the DCP and the LEP. Sadly, even though we requested extra time from the state government, we weren't able to influence them to give us that extra time. This resolution, which calls for a review, and reviews are a natural part of an LSPS process, he says, putting his teeth back in. And it's to be done within 7 years. Certainly we'll do it within 7 years, and I hope we come back to it, if not yearly, possibly biannually. We need to look at the fact that there's a changing circumstance in the world that we live in, and we need to be able to react, and we need to be able to be resilient, and the review process gives us that opportunity to react and to show our resilience. So I commend the motion to you. It does clear up a few issues that were probably not presented as well as they could have been due to the rush nature of this process. And that's why I go back to finish off with thanking the staff, because I know that they've prepared a major document in a limited amount of time with input from all over the LGA. I commend the motion, and I call on the councillors to support it as posted here tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Sundstrom. Councillor Greenway, you said you've got an amendment, or do you want to add something? Or
oh gosh, sorry. I just have to mute myself to. Oh no, I'll struggle on. I just wondered with 3C, where it says delete page 26, our engagement, and page 27, what we've heard so far. Just because we don't actually see what those pages are in the final document, you know, how page numbers can change and things like that. And I've just had a few people say, how do you know they're going to be the right pages to delete? So either put the current pages or put and the content not appear anywhere else in the document or something, just so it's abundantly clear that it's that content that's to be deleted.
not the page number?
Yeah, not necessarily the page number, because when you readjust all the pages, we might be deleting a different page 26 and page 27. And the most important thing is that the content doesn't appear anywhere else in the document. So maybe just at the end of that, delete page 26, our engagement, page 27, what we've heard so far, and that the content of these pages not appear anywhere else in the document.
Councillor Smith is the
look, that's fine, Madam Mayor. Maybe just happy with those additional words, but just after the quotes to the meeting support staff, if they may. So what we've heard so far, if you put in brackets, just as per the original draft document, close brackets, and then you can leave Councillor Greenaway's words there as well. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Best.
Thanks, Lisa. A question, if I could, through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Murphy. Gary, Mr. Murphy, we've got a document before us, an amended document on your staff recommendation. At best guesstimate and a quick count, I can see 27 alterations, changes or suggestions to the document. And I received it less than an hour ago. Could you please share with me what your views are on the material changes this may have on the exhibited document the community has responded to? And when did you see this major amendment that we now have on our screens for consideration, Mr. Murphy? I have a supplement question too, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Best, in relation to the broad changes, my understanding is that there was a councillor workshop held last Monday on the 22nd, where I think 3 or 4 councillors attended that and workshopped the majority of the changes, as I understand it, that are on the screen now. There have been subsequent changes that the Deputy Mayor has provided today. I believe that I saw the changes that are on the screen now, probably at the same time as Council Lords. I think Deputy Mayor sent it through in the break. But having said, yeah, so that was at 5:42 p.m. But having said that, I understand that Mr. Cox and the staff have been working with the Mayor during the day. So I'm not sure whether there were subsequent changes to that, but I understand the staff have been consulted in the latest changes.
So do you say that the changes that are there, workshop by 4 councillors, are the same items that you discussed in your workshop of 4 of the 15 councillors, or have there been changes here again?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, I can't really comment on the final changes as compared to what was at the workshop. I haven't had the opportunity to compare those. Mr. Cox may be able to advise, but
and further, Gary, if I could ask you, the mover of the original amendment, or now the motion, I think it is, Madam Mayor, said that it's important to reflect community aspirations. Have these amendments been out to the public for consultation, Mr. General Manager?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, I don't believe so, but my understanding is that the amendments have been based on the consultation, and I guess the mover of the motion can perhaps add to that.
Well, look, Madam Mayor, may I make comment if I could? Look, we all know the difficulties around such a high-level document. I grant you that, and I see much of this is well-intended, a little bit motherhoodish from time to time, hard to quantify and hard to deliver, but nevertheless trying to move in a direction, I think, out of genuineness. However, I am a stickler for our community being taken on the journey, and nobody in this council could possibly suggest that this council hasn't from time to time brought such decisions in at the last minute, making it just about impossible for councillors to really meaningfully contribute, let alone our community. Councillors, you all saw that with our previous mayor, where there were some 9 times that mayoral minutes were brought to the council at the last minute, and there is no question in my mind that they weren't typical of an ambush for a policy position. We didn't have time to review them. I mean, I keep going back to the pile burn policy where we affected 6,596 people at 9 o'clock at night without any consultation. And this is what concerns me. And I so regularly hear in this particular council, Madam Mayor, you know, you've been in a few councils yourself, Lisa, and this council's got a mantra of transparency, open and accountability. Why does it keep saying it when it doesn't seem to be able to practice it? That in lies the question I've got here. There may not be too many sinister motives among all this, but councillors, you were elected to represent your community. And it's like the airport. People get up and wax lyrically telling us that we don't want an airport, we don't need an airport, nobody wants an airport. You haven't consulted anybody officially yet, but you guys all know what somebody wants, the community in this case. So I think that if we're going to take these kinds of steps, we need to do it with our community. And we'll be harshly judged in just over 12 months' time, I think, if we continue to do this. I can't support this. There's no way I could go down this path. I mean, at 5:46 this afternoon, we've been given access to this document. This is a monumental document affecting 340,000 people, and we can't get our act together to understand this a little bit sooner. And yet I have to put my right hand up or down, and then I'm vilified for making this speech. Come on, this is not fair income. You're not being reasonable. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Best. Councillor Hogan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to speak for the motion, and thank you, staff, for bringing this LSPS to the community. And I think, unfortunately, it is supposed to be a broad statement. And if you look at other councils, it's not ward-based, it's actually regional-based. And Penrith is a good example of that, with 15 councils and 3 wards. So it's a statement and a vision about what we want to see in the future. Unfortunately, with ours, we have gone along the path of, and we all agreed to that, which was ward-based. So now we're getting into the detail of what's going to happen within our wards, and there rests our problem, and that's why there's been a lot of amendments. In relation to what Councillor Best was saying, I'd just like to say there was community consultation across the 5 wards. All community residents were invited to a Zoom meeting, which was actually very interactive and very interesting, and hence they were encouraged to write submissions. Further to that, Jane organised what I would say a meeting, because it's only an hour, it wasn't actually a workshop. The most important thing was the community consult, and to look at what came out of the submissions at that 1-hour workshop. Further to that, I would say there hasn't been probably enough discussion amongst councillors about maybe looking at this further. However, again, I will say we can look at this in 3 months' time, and we can tweak it so we get the best for our wards, and in particular, the ward statements. I think that's probably gone a little bit amiss. Otherwise, I support the motion and moving forward, and we do have to remember this is a responsibility of ours to the state government. It's not set in concrete. There's no money attached to it. It's a vision for the coast. However, again, I do believe it needs to go back to community consult. These reports are coming back way too quickly. They're coming back too quickly. However, they're coming back with very little time to go over them, to actually get back to the community and say, hey, this is in it, how can we amend that? And thank you, Councillor Smith, for bringing this.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Councillor Hogan. I'm just going to, I know Councillor Holstein, you have a comment, but are there anybody speaking? We've had 3, 4, 1 against. Are there anybody that wants to speak against it, just so I can be fair to those maybe against? I take that as a no. Oh, are you against, Councillor McLaughlin?
Yes.
Right. Okay. You speak against, please.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'll mirror Councillor Best's comments. It's very hard when you get a document so late in the day to get your head around it. I think the fact that we can change it is a good thing. I think it needs to go out to the public, and that I just think, and it's becoming habitual now that these documents are thrown to us just before the meeting. I just have an amendment. It's only words, was the deputy's words in the briefing. Guilty and not guilty are only words too, but they have two different meanings. So I would like to say, for future, if we could just get a little bit more notice than 20 minutes or half an hour before the meeting on such big documents, that would be really appreciative. I find it very difficult. Can't even scroll down in the Zoom meeting to see all the documents. So, I think we shouldn't, take it aboard that this is just impossible to agree with. You don't know what you're agreeing with. So I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Holstein, comment?
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Madam Mayor? Look, I can agree to a certain extent with previous items that have come before us. most definitely with Councillor McLaughlin and Councillor Best, because some of those have been instrumental in changes. There are a couple of factors with this that I think we need to take into mind. It is an overarching document. I agree with Councillor Smith in that this needs to come back and for reconsideration on amendments and changes, but it is, as I was clearly indicated to me this afternoon in conversations that I took the time and effort to have with the staff, as an overarching document that is needed to be in by the end of the month under the state government's request. You don't do that, we have a problem. And I'm not a fan of late-minute motions coming up. And I've got to say, one of the biggest things that Councillor Smith pointed out to is that there was impact, very much impact because of COVID in how some of the aspects of Zoom forums and online forums and how those things went. I don't think they were particularly good in that it wasn't the effort or criticism of the staff. It was a fact that was many other things happening in our community. A lot of our community wouldn't have been able to have the capacity to put in the input. You look back at the video forums that they did. Wyong had 11 people, Budgie had 6, East Gosford ward had 14, 15 in the West Gosford ward, nil in the entrance ward for the forums. Then the online forums, well, that was a little better. I think we had 43 participants, and we had something like 120 across the, 58 comments. Now, there was a range of other things. The staff have done an exceptional job in difficult times to get the message out. But then councillors, let's not have a go at the community too. There was a forum for us councillors. 4 out of 15 of us showed up. Now, I was an apology for the night, as I'm sure that my other colleagues had other things on as well. This document is an overarching document, and I think Councillor Smith has endeavoured, at this instance, I won't agree on all of them, but at this instance, to try and move forward to meet the government's requirements. And she's put some protections in there for us to be able to go back and make further comment when life returns to somewhat a little bit more normal. But we as councillors too have got to show our responsibility, and I'm very disappointed I wasn't able to get to the meeting, but neither was 8 of my colleagues. 9 of my colleagues weren't able to get there as well. So we've got to take some of this responsibility on. We've got to get this through. It is an overarching document with an opportunity to change. So I will support it. Unlike some of the other motions which have more of an impact, this is overarching. And that was clarified for me in conversations earlier today with council staff. Thanks, Madam
Thank
Mayor.
you, Councillor Holstein. Right to reply, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I agree with the councillors that expressed concerns about these items coming late in the piece, and I understand that. Again, I'll repeat some previous comments that I've made. Firstly, I do think we need to get our processes better, and I'm grateful that our staff are working on that, and I think they will improve. Really, these documents should have had us all sitting around a table well before a report gets up to council or is even thought about going on the agenda on council. And I hope that will happen as we get some of those processes right. But I think the fact is that we are a very large council. These documents are very big. Everybody is under pressure in terms of working through this workload. I will just make the comment about the ward-based approach. Now, I know some councillors think it shouldn't have been a ward-based approach, others do. The reason for the ward-based approach was that required that staff work with the ward councillors in developing this local strategic plan. So I think that was the benefit of going through the ward-based approach. Of course, it's still up to the councillors to engage with the staff as well. And so I suspect some of those councillors that are feeling a little bit blindsided, aren't really sure what's going on, perhaps haven't engaged as effectively as is their responsibility to do so as well. Councillor McLaughlin, I realise it was sent late, but it was sent that you could scroll it on your computer. You didn't have to rely on the screen in front of you. So look, I appreciate the support. I guess the other important point of this is that it is adopting an interim local strategic planning statement with a review process over the next 3 months, that we can sit down together. And I would encourage those councillors that are feeling that they get things at the last minute, come along to some of these workshops or these meetings or these sessions and find out what the conversations are, so that you don't feel so blindsided next time. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I will therefore put the motion as moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Sundstrom. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Matthews, Councillor McGregor, Councillor Mertens, Councillor Hogan, Councillor Sundstrom, Councillor Smith, Councillor Greenway, Councillor Holstein. All those against? Councillor Burke, Councillor Gale, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Best. I declare the motion carried. Thank you, councillors. I'm now moving on to a procedural motion. As I flagged with councillors, I'm proposing that we separate the consideration of the operational plan from the fees and charges, and the motion is now on the screen. That in considering item 3.1, update on the operational plan 2021, that council consider the ongoing operation under the operational plan 2019-20, including the approval of the grant funded projects separately from the determination as to fees and charges. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hogan. Councillor, I now put the procedural as moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hogan. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Matthews, Councillor Gale, Councillor McGregor, Councillor Mertens, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Hogan, Councillor Sundstrom, Councillor Best, Councillor Smith, Councillor Greenway, Councillor Holstein. Against? Abstentions? Councillor Burke's an abstention. It's carried. Thank you, councillors. So moving on to item 3.1, which is the update on the operational plan. The recommendation is on the screen. Councillors, do I have a mover for the operational plan? That we basically that motion is that the meeting it'll come to the meeting on the 27th of July. Do I have a mover? I'll move it. Seconder, Councillor Hogan. Do I have anybody want to speak? Waive my rights. I don't believe we need to speak to it tonight. Councillor Hogan, did you want to speak to it? No. Councillor Best, I know you have a question to the staff or of the staff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we're dealing with, I'll just read the fine print, 2 separate items, I want to get it right. Yep. And we're dealing with the operational plan 1920.
Which basically is talking about that we will now be discussing the operational plan
2021.
On 27th of July 2020. Right.
Mr. Murphy, if I could, and I have some questions for Mr. Oldfield as well. Gary, Mr. Murphy, I was reading through here, I think it was page 7, and it says, in April 2020, due to the extenuating circumstances being faced during the COVID-19 emergency, the Minister for Local Government announced amendments to the Local Government Act. My question is that back then we knew that there were movement around this matter being possibly deferred. Why did we need to have this extraordinary meeting? Why could this not have been, as staff regularly do, bring additional items to the previous meeting, Mr. Murphy?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, you are correct that this extraordinary meeting tonight was originally for the adoption of the operational plan, and I guess the staff considered, given the importance of the operational plan, that a separate meeting would be required to allow councillors to have a full discussion. It was then subsequently requested that the LSPS that council has just adopted to accept also be included on that meeting as well. I think also, as councillors have become aware, that changes that have been taking place in relation to COVID-19 and the likely impacts on the budget. The staff felt that it was necessary to give council laws as much time as possible to consider those impacts, and hence why we have the proposed workshop this weekend, and then requesting that the council consider the adoption of the operational plan on the 27th of July.
Thank you, Gary. Could I ask of Mr. Oldfield, I have a few questions of he, if I may, please, Madam Mayor. Carlton, where are you? Where is he?
There. In the
Well,
Brady
I
Bunch,
can
he's below
see.
you.
I can
For you,
see him,
Madam
yeah.
Mayor. How are you?
Well, you're actually, Lucy, you're right next to me in my screen.
Oh.
Yeah, you're right next to me. Yeah, it's interesting how the screens vary, doesn't it? We're all learning here in Zoom land. Mr. Oldfield, thank you for your time this evening. Just correct me if I'm wrong. I've worked through some of these numbers, and I appreciate some of your feedback leading up to this, because as directors know, I take time to speak with them around different issues. You know, some believe that attending briefings is the only way one can achieve knowledge and understanding, but I can assure you we have some extraordinarily good staff that can share a lot with you if you ask. So, Mr. Oldfield, this particular budget we're moving into, inverted commas, next week or thereabouts, or really next month, the budgeted loss for the exhibited loss is the better term. The exhibited loss for the 2021 is 30.
It currently stands at 32.4. Sorry, for you, Madam Mayor. Councillor
Yes.
Best, the exhibited loss for the 2021 year is 32.4 million.
So this budget's crafted with a known negative going forward of $32.4 million. Being that on my screen, we've got the 1920 operational plan sitting there as well, just by way of what will be history tomorrow almost. The current year, Mr. Oldfield, I understand we had a budgeted loss, actually an agreed loss this time last year of $18 million, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Best.
Could you share with us where that $18 million loss has now ended up in the Q3?
The publishing of the Q3 business paper, we provided a forecast for the 20 financial year with a changed operating position.
Of $41.6 million?
That's correct, Councillor Best.
So we've had a budgeted loss of 18 million and we've achieved a 41 million in Q3, which, you know, who knows, if you look at and extrapolate that, Madam Mayor, out, you've started at 18, you've ended up at 41 in the third, we've got a quarter running, you could be 50 million lost by the end of the time these figures are all shaken down. I just wanted to raise that for where we're going with this. Carlton, with some of our costs, what's our wages costs for the business in last year versus this year?
For you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, the employee costs that we achieved for 2019 actuals is 194.9, and the budget assumed for 2020 that we just spoke about earlier comes at 205.8.
And that it's not really your number, but Mr. Murphy shared with us that since amalgamation, our staff numbers are up 500 on pre-amalgamation period, which might help reflect some of that. If I could, I've got some. We're going to get to fees and charges shortly, aren't we, Madam Mayor? I can't hear you, Lisa. You're muted.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Best.
Okay, well, Carl, I've got some series of questions around that that I might ask. If I could just in conclusion...
Councillor Best, I'll ask you not to talk about fees and charges on this call if I...
No, I won't. I'll ask in a minute, I meant, yes.
Yep.
But if I may, in conclusion, ask of Carlton, Mr. Oldfield, we've we've had some workshops. I had a workshop which I sought to expedite, but we didn't do that, and we're now where we are. And we discussed rate arrears. I'll use that term. And some of that rate arrears is crafted into and going to be crafted into the budget that we're going to be dealing with eventually. What's the rate arrears look like? I mean, we're 3 months into COVID, 2.5, 3 months into COVID. The Mayor has put out a recent statement encouraging people to come to council and speak to them around if they have financial issues and seek rate arrears. That was, I saw 3 media outlets reporting that. What is the current uptake of rate arrears at the moment that you could call COVID related, Mr. Oldfield?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, at this time, it's the trend is negative. Is probably the best way of putting it.
Like zero.
What's it called? It isn't. It's hard to state at this point in time because we are ending towards the end of the financial year. So the amount of arrears is small, I guess, in terms of nominal. But the trajectory or the deceleration, I guess, is a better way of putting it, is that receipts are not coming in as they were as they were last year, and we won't get full visibility, unfortunately, until probably the end of the first quarter, with extensions to due dates and some of the changes that we expect to come through from FOLG next year. We'll see that impact in a couple of months.
And further to the recent press releases by the Mayor's office around encouraging people to seek assistance from council on rate arrears, I've had a particular bane in my mind around the fact that councils are gouging interest rates on people who are in difficult times and can't pay their rates. In fact, we and many other councils have been charging 6 and 7% on interest, just gouging people that are desperate. I've argued for many years on that point. The state government, I understand, has stepped into their credit. What interest rate do they charge now on people in hardship, or demand that we charge people in hardship?
At this point in time, the interest rate continues to be at the levels you mentioned earlier. The change you're referring to is the minister has deemed that the interest rate from 1 July onwards will be 0% for outstanding accounts.
So we won't be charging them anything if they fall into financial hardship, as opposed to what we were charging them, 6 and 7%.
That's correct, Councillor Best.
So when you're down your luck, we charge you a fortune. All right, look, tell me if I could finally, the criteria, because we're going to go forward in this space, and this may mean a significant impact to our budget settings, particularly our cash that we discussed. I won't go into those numbers because we did speak at the workshop and requested that we didn't go too far in that area, and I think that's only responsible at this stage, but I think we need to share. What criteria are we putting in place, Mr. Oldfield, around people coming to council and saying, look, you know, I'm affected, I've got a difficult time here, I've got whatever situation. What are we putting in place that is a position for staff to go through a sheet to identify if someone's fair income or someone's having a bit of a go?
For you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, there's a number of things that that staff undertake in terms of, I guess, engaging with ratepayers that are currently in hardship. Obviously, we expect the numbers to go up in light of the current economic situation. Look, there's a natural debt recovery program, I guess, that we undertake about validating ratepayers in terms of those who are contacting us around their arrears, and we obviously seek to engage and do work with them to seek an appropriate outcome for them and also for council. Obviously, the intent behind that is obviously working on an acceptable payment arrangement, and if that takes a period of time, then so be it. The emphasis is on working with ratepayers to get the right outcome.
And look, thank you, Madam Mayor. And in closing, Carlton, Mr. Oldfield, can you tell me, because this report we've got in front of us has got COVID permeated through it. The word COVID comes up quite a few times on my screen on my left-hand machine here. Can you tell me what part COVID has played in council current $41 million loss and the projected $32 million loss for next year. What part has COVID played in those two figures, which is about $80 million loss over 2 years? What part has COVID played in that for us?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, not able to confirm the finite number that particularly pertains to the COVID. There's a number of interactions with councils and the breadth of councils' operations. It could be cash flow, which would lead to timing differences, particularly around receipt income. But there's a number of permanent changes around, particularly say DA fees, a lot of business-related income. They are one-off permanent differences.
If I may, can I narrow the question? What part has COVID played in our current third quarter $41.6 million loss?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there's an amount that we referred to in the quarter 3 budget that escapes me at this point in time. My apologies. I can take that a notice and come back to you.
You'd be pretty safe to say almost zero, would not one?
I can confirm we did have an amount, but yeah, at this point in time, the number fails me, so I'll have to come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Oldfield. I appreciate your help. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I might speak to this shortly, if I may.
Okay, Councillor Hogan.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I just want to briefly speak to this motion. The motion simply is asking for the adoption of the operational plan to be at the meeting of 27th July. That is to give councillors time to meet on the weekend, to go through the budget, to look at what's in, look at what's out, and if you haven't had a look, you'd want to be there. Because I can tell you now, things aren't looking good. What Councillor Best wants from this, he wants Carlton to say that the deficit is from something the Labor and the CEN and the LNPs and the independents did. That's what Councillor Best is after. He's not concerned about the actual operational plan and what's in it. That's his concern. So he can bury everybody else in this and then come up the hero as usual. I've heard it for 2.5 years. This is serious stuff. The staff have worked really, really hard on this operational plan. I know for a fact I'm not happy at all. However, we could not predict COVID and we can't predict what income is coming back into the council. At the moment, we don't even know if people aren't going to pay their rates. It's just a projection. I want to hope that everybody does, because all those little projects will have to be put aside. So that's what this is about. So we put it back to the 27th. So we've got an opportunity to look at it in more depth. And I hope that everyone turns up and that we continue with the 19-20 budget, that we start the grant funded projects, because that's not our money. We need to start those, and we get down to that operational plan and look at what we can achieve, rather than what I hear every meeting, the politicising of it all. I hear it at briefings. You're being political, you're being political. No. I can tell you now, I'm not being political. I just want this job done. And for us to sit there for half an hour to listen to the same old stories, Councillor Best, I'm sorry. How long have you been in power? How long have you been in the council? 20 years. You know how these work. You know how politics works. But I can assure you, I know how community works. And it's going to be a very, very sorry day. And that's what we've got to look at. And that's the part I'm concerned about, not your whole politicising that. That's exactly what you're doing. Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hogan. Do I have any speakers against the motion? Councillor Best, you're speaking against the motion, which is to determine on the 27th of July.
Yes, that's correct. Look, we've just heard the diatribe from Councillor Hogan about fairies at the bottom of the garden and politics. Well, as a card-carrying party member, I don't think that some in the council should be lecturing an independent. But Madam Mayor, at the end of the day, I don't make the figures up. They're sitting there for all to read and see. We have a $41.6 million loss. We have a projected loss into next
Sorry,
year, next week.
Councillor Best, we have a point of order from Councillor Sundstrom. Councillor Sundstrom.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. I just want to ask Councillor Best to come back to the issue. This isn't about what a deficit may be. It's not about the figures. This is about deferring a matter until a future meeting. So if you can just address those matters rather than continuing his diatribe, that would be appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Sundstrom. Councillor Best, the motion is purely about having this matter dealt with on the 27th of July.
That's right. And when we deal with the matter on the 27th of July, I want every councillor to understand what they have to go and try and manage. And I just don't think that is completely digested with a few. But again, as I always say, Councillor Sundstrom, thank you for your contribution. Councillors, if we do take this to the workshop, and I can count, then I've raised repeatedly a range of issues that we have to deal with. The elephant in the room coming up to what will be a very sobering workshop. The elephant in the room is that we have 500 plus staff more than we had at the amalgamation. Now, every time I raise that, I have people saying you're going to fire everybody. No, we're not. All you need to do is put in a moratorium on rehiring and you will bring staff levels down by 402 years. Nobody loses a job that way. Everybody wins. But this council refuses to look at the HR situation of the business. The ratepayers are hemorrhaging.
Sorry, Councillor Best, we have a further point of order from
Another
Councillor
contribution.
Sundstrom.
I'd like to just rerun the tape of what I just asked. It's the same thing again. This is about whether we defer this matter until a future meeting. Very interesting comments from Councillor Best. I look forward to hearing them at the workshop on the weekend, but let's get back to the matter at hand and not waste the community's time.
Thank you, Councillor Sundstrom.
Well, the reason that we
Councillor
might,
Best.
I agree, thank you, Madam Mayor. The reason we should have dealt with this, and that's part of this argument, we should have dealt with this long ago. I put a resolution up.
Councillor Sundstrom.
The clock's still running.
Yeah, Madam Mayor. Councillor Best just spoke straight at the top of you. Didn't give you an opportunity to rule on the point of order, and I'd like you to pull him in the line.
I am asking Councillor Best to stick to the motion. Councillor Best.
I'm asking him.
Yeah. Councillor Best, can you please stick to the motion, which is
thank you, Madam Mayor. I do appreciate your latitude. So I put a motion into this very chamber more than 6 weeks ago asking for an urgent emergency briefing of the full council. Was told it was not necessary and it was voted down. So that's why I think this is nonsense. You all had an opportunity. In fact, I think I rescinded it and brought it in and gave you another chance at it, and you voted that down as well. So, you know, you're now saying we need to have an extension of time. You took 6 months to get the audited accounts in for last year, and now you're going to run two periods. You're going to have an 11-month. The reason why you don't want to do this and why you should have done it before, and I asked you to do it, and you all said no, not necessary, not urgent, not required. You had a chance after your February flood when you cut the workshop in half. I tried to get you on the program faster, but no, we don't need to do it because Bestie's raises, so we'll do the Mother Teresa Christmas card with him and vote it down again. You've dug a hole for yourself. So what are you going to have going forward? You're going to have an 11-month year and you're going to have a 13-month year. You're not going to be able to determine really how the place is tracking come the future, and you're digging that hole. It's the same with the rate harmonisation nonsense that you also voted down, where you didn't harmonise the rates for the people of Wyong and keep making them pay. This stuff has been raised to you and offered to you, and what do you do with it? You just kick it back in someone's face, and now you've dug another hole, and I will show you a hole that you're going to dig very shortly around your fees and charges. See how that hole works.
Thank you, Councillor Best. Councillor McGregor.
Well, that was 20 minutes of our lives that we're never going to get back. I'm sure the community needed to listen to that ridiculous bun fight and the usual political and economic chicanery that comes from those on the extreme right. Look, if you're going to vote against this, you're actually voting against grant funding from the state and federal government, and you're actually voting against jobs and business and economic opportunities. This has been delayed for obvious reasons. We're fully aware of the reasons. Now, some people like to play silly games in public to try and mislead people and carry on with rubbish. Other people are actually serious about the process of dealing with the economic challenges that we face. I've not voted for any of the budgets that have come to this chamber, and I've been the most critical person of the economic policy of this council, and I continue to be, but I don't come at it from the ridiculous slash and burn point of view. This nonsense about staffing is just an excuse to try and sack people and cut jobs. If you look at the two former councils as they were a decade ago, they had over 1,000 more staff than what we have now. The staff numbers were higher. You had the restructures at the former councils. They slashed jobs, slashed services, and that's one of the main reasons why people were fed up and voted new people in last time. So this is an attempt to try and cover up the failed, illegitimate policy positions of the former councils, and then to try and taint this council with having to, the trouble that we have is picking up the rubbish that was left before us and moving on from it. Combine that with an amalgamation that still isn't finished, which we've got $50 billion for, and is going to cost, at first estimate, roughly between $350 and $400 million. And now we don't even know the proper estimate because we don't even get the official information on that. We've had no more financial assistance for that. And then you've got the same people who are complaining about debt and deficit going out and saying, you know what, council's going to go and build a multi-$100 million jet airport at Warnervale that everyone wants, even though people have been consulted about it 3 or 4 different times and consistently said no. And the state government didn't change the Act of Parliament, and the state government didn't incorporate it in the 2036 plan. It's the same old political chicanery that we've had to put up with for 2 decades from these old actors that have no place to be spreading these lies and myths. Now, this council does have serious economic challenges in front of it, and it's got nothing to do with the fiscal policy that the staff have prepared. Now, some people have been doing these budgets for 3 years, other people have been doing it for 20. We all know that we go in there, we have the documents all prepared for us. A few of us actually hold our ground and fight to get a couple of extra footpaths laid, a couple of extra roads, potholes done, or get some parks put in and not flogged off. The other ones don't even bother to turn up, and then they sit here and smear everyone in the media and in these council meetings. This has got nothing to do with that. Council does have a serious revenue problem. We do have issues that need to be addressed, but they need to be addressed right. And the problem is, and this is the thing which is going to come out of the bag with the next council meeting, we deal with the operational plan, is that you have a view in here which should be a minority view, but it is increasingly gaining traction that people need to tear up the budget, even though it's been out to community consultation, even though there's no evidence that taking on an austerity approach is going to improve the regional economy. And that's what this is really about. We should be talking about that at the next meeting, not now. Vote for this motion and you're going to get the grant funding through, and then you're going to have those same arguments next time. But they are the arguments that should be had at the appropriate time, and this is just delaying, trying to get a headline, the same rubbish we put up with every 2 weeks.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillors, there are no further people wanting to speak, so therefore I will move the motion as moved by myself, second by Councillor Hogan. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Matthews, Councillor McGregor, Councillor Mertens, Councillor Hogan, Councillor Sundstrom, Councillor Smith, Councillor Greenway, Councillor Holstein. All those against? Councillor Burke, Councillor Gale, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Best. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, we are moving on to item now 3.2, I'm assuming, which will be the fees and charges. I therefore will be leaving, and Councillor Smith, Deputy Mayor Smith, will be, it's 3.1 part 2, councillors, is what we're moving to. I'll be leaving, as will Councillor Hogan, as we have pecuniary interests. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Has that been resolved? So the Mayor has, no, the Mayor and Councillor Hogan, are you the other person that's leaving? All right, thank you, councillors. Councillors, we do have a recommendation on the screen. Do I have a mover for the motion? Move Councillor McGregor. Is there a seconder? Seconded Councillor Mertens. Councillor McGregor, did you want to speak to that, please?
I'll move what's on the screen, including the amendment, which is below.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. We'll just draw councillors' attention to that. So there is an additional part 3 that council continue with the 2019-20 fees and charges for sporting groups and ground hire into the 2021 financial year. Councillor McGregor, did you want to speak to that, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Look, the amendment is quite clear. It provides continuity and certainty for the clubs and sporting groups, and this is about focusing on ensuring that we can deliver affordable and high quality sports fields and to the benefit of our community. Now, I've been approached by the Sports Council as well as other clubs pleading with us to keep the current fees and charges, because the Sports Federation Australia has recently released a report that shows that 1 in 3 community sporting clubs across the codes is likely to become insolvent or to fold because of lack of sponsorship and increased costs. So this is not about getting in a reduction. This is about maintaining the current costs that exist. There is 2 points of view on this. There is one, that there are councils that charge absolutely nothing for ground hire, and that, you know, because we are a large regional council and that people are concerned about health and mental health and physical activity, that we should be moving towards a model which is community driven. And there's also an alternative view, which is the user pays view, which is that there are other councils which have higher fees, so we should be looking to go to them. An example, a practical example of where this would benefit clubs, and something which creates a lot of animosity and angst out there with the sporting clubs and the council, is the issue of the keys. So when you have the keys for the grounds that are used, the sporting clubs currently pay a $2,000 bond for the keys, and then in the new fees and charges that were put forward, that would go from $2,000 to $2,050. Now, $50 might not seem like a lot, but that's $50 that could be saved. Other examples are around the increased charges for the sporting field hire and the things like that. So this is really about doing what we can in a sensitive way and an economically responsible way. This is not looking for a massive reduction, but this is about actually maintaining what's there to try and adapt to the situation that we're in with COVID. The other thing that needs to be said is that this would be an example of where we can actually do things in the community's best interests, and this is about who this council chooses to serve. Do we serve ourselves and try and jack the fees and charges up in order to increase our revenue, or do we say, hang on a second, there are some community groups where we're getting such a huge tangible benefit from it, we should look at either maintaining or reducing fees and charges. Where people have the capacity to pay is where we should be looking. And one of the last things I'd like to see us do is, after the COVID situation and also the recession, because the recession is going to be the bigger impact over the next decade, is that we're going to go and slug junior sport and amateur sport and say to people, we want you to be fit and healthy. By the way, we're cutting back on this and we're going to put the fees and charges up, and if you're lucky, you'll still have a job, and we'll try and reduce your wages. Now, that's not a point of view that I agree with. I'm here to actually try and do the right thing by the community and to service the people of the Central Coast. So, councillors, I implore you to keep the fees and charges as they are for the as they were with the 1920 for the next year, and that will provide certainty to the sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Mertens, did you want to speak as seconder of the motion? Councillor Mertens, yes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Thank you. I just want to echo the words of Councillor McGregor as well. I think that the sporting fees is a matter that he's been following for a number of years, and it's an ongoing issue that I hear regularly, especially around fees for lighting for after-hours venues, and that's something that's an ongoing discussion that we will continue to have, unfortunately. But I do want to acknowledge the role that fees and charges do play in our budget. They're one of the 3 major parts of our budget, along with rate revenue and grants from government. And I'm pleased that we should be able to continue these for those services and for those groups that do rely on our council services ongoing. I want to thank staff for their flexibility in acknowledging some of the community concerns, especially around the cost and charges related to parking in the Gosford CBD. A lot of people who rely on that, and a lot of the businesses who use those, and the workers who work with them in the Gosford CBD have been facing challenging circumstances. So I do think that a lot of those workers and a lot of those employers will not have to go through a fee increase this year. So I do thank staff for that. Look, that's all I want to say. I think this is an important thing we get through today. This is along with the rates, this is an important part of council's revenue. We've been hearing a lot about how our revenue is going to take a hit, and it's important that we make sure that we do have the fees and charges in place to make sure that we can continue to provide those important services.
Thank you, Councillor Mertens. Councillor Best, do you have a question? Councillor Best, do you have a question?
I have a question. Look, I'll hold the question. I might ask it later. I'd like to make comment to it, if I may, Acting Chair.
So you're speaking for or against, Councillor Best?
I'm speaking against the fees and charges.
Thank you, Councillor Best.
I'm kind of curious. I was going to ask the mover and the seconder if they could tell me how much are fees and charges and how much have they gone up on last year. But I don't think I'll waste my time asking, because I'll get some wafting cockamamie answer that indicates neither of them know the answer to it. And I, for one, am not going to be in a council that continues to gouge from its ratepayers. This council last week added to its haul of rate take tax. We take $335.4 million of the punters of the Central Coast. We put $4.4 million extra dollars in last week on the 2.6 CPI increase, except CPI is 2.1, not 2.6, so we gouge there as well. We've been charging 6 to 7% on people that fall on hard times and can't pay their rent. And we get the violin out and we listen to these battlers trying to cobble an argument together as to why they can't pay their rates. And we hit them up for 6 and 7%. And that's compassion. God bless us. So what are we doing this time? I hear the mover and the seconder waxing lyrically about, how we've got to, work with people and we've got to keep costs down and we've got to be reasonable. Well, how come it is that in 1920, we charged the punters of this community $57 million, $57 million on fees and charges. That's what we charged them. And what are we charging them this year? Maybe the mover and seconder could answer it, but I doubt it. But they moved it and seconded it and waxed lyrically, because you guys are going to take, if you put your hands up tonight, an extra $10 million off the punters of this community who we just got told are struggling to do things, and we've really got to be kind to them. So we're going to put our hands up and be kind to them to the tune of $10 million more tonight. Like, councillors, you come after me so regularly and you lecture me, Councillor Hogan, so often, and you're just so wrong so many times. You don't listen, you just wait to speak. You don't consult, you just tell the public what's good for them. And you're relieving from them $335 million. You put $4 million into it. And then only 6 months ago, you tore up a cheque for $5 million on Winnie Bay and handed it back to the state government. No wonder we need an election.
Thank you, Councillor Best. Your time is up. Councillor Greenaway, you had a question. Councillor Greenaway, your question?
Yes, I just had a question about, there's a significant tree register and there's a charge, I think, of $250. I just wanted to know, who pays the $250? The person proposing that the tree be added to the register? I just thought it was an odd charge for someone who's nominating a tree, because it's not their tree. And secondly, is that what was the fee before, when it was, because the tree register's only just been extended to Wyong, the former Wyong, so what was it before when it was the former Gosford?
Thank you, Councillor Greenaway. Through the CEO, I'm not sure who's going to be answering that for you. Perhaps Mr. Oldfield, I might.
For you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Greenaway, I have to pass this one, unfortunately. Maybe Scott Cox may be able to help with this one. Sorry.
That's right.
Through the CEO, I wonder if Mr. Cox is able to assist.
Through you, Madam Chair. In terms of the fee, it will be paid by the person proposing to have the significant tree registered. In terms of historical fees, I'd have to take that one on notice and get back to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Councillor Greenaway?
No, I just was curious to see if there was a fee. That was also...
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
I guess a follow-up to that would be, Mr. Cox has taken the question on notice, but I'm assuming there was a fee. So can you at least say whether it was comparable, or is this new, or some guidance?
Through the CEO, Mr. Cox.
Through you, Madam Chair, as I said before, Councillor Greenaway can come back with all those, with all that information for you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cox. Councillors, do I have any other speakers against the motion? So it doesn't look like I do. So Councillor McGregor, did you want to close debate?
Thank you. In closing, I'll just make reference to the fact that endorsing this resolution would be consistent with the approach that we've taken over the last few years to try and keep the fees and charges down for the people who are in genuine community groups and the people who have the least capacity to pay. And I encourage councillors to vote for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillors, I'll put the motion moved by Councillor McGregor, seconded by Councillor Mertens. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor McGregor, Councillor Burke, Councillor Mertens, Councillor Sundstrom, Councillor Holstein, Councillor Smith. Those opposed? Councillor Best, Councillor Gale, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Greenaway. I declare the motion carried. Thank you, councillors. We will just invite the Mayor and Councillor Hogan back in. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll hand back to you. Madam Mayor, we don't seem to be able to hear you at the moment.
No.
Yes, we have you now, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. My apologies. Headset. Councillors, there are no further items of business for tonight's meeting, so therefore I will declare the meeting closed at 7:57. Thank you. What happened there?
Thank you.